Welcome back, everyone, to the Temple of Technology. I'm your host, Scott James Magner, the idiot with a microphone, with another episode of our RS Entertainment webcast. So here's the deal. Today, we'll be talking about the Twin Peaks pilot from 1990, both the regular American and the expanded international versions. Oh. And we're back here. I'm your host, as always, Scott James Magner, the idiot with a microphone, and with me is my co-host and co-conspirator, Julie McGalliard. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Scott James.
Remind people who you are and why we're talking about Twin Peaks.
All right. I'm Julie McGalliard. I write a series of werewolf novels called Tales of the Rougarou. And we are talking about Twin Peaks because I'm a huge David Lynch fan. Um, and in fact, I've tried writing books that are like David Lynch, but I don't have the gift of surrealism. I feel like it's really a gift that you have to have. And I've never quite managed it. So maybe someday.
You may need to spend a lot more time looking at rotting rabbits and cats. That appears to be part of the process. Or spend time in Philadelphia so
Hmm.
that your soul dies.
Oh, see, I think I just haven't spent enough time in Philadelphia,
You
I
spend
think is really.
altogether too much time in New Orleans for your own good. You're far too happy.
Mm.
We got to fix that. All right, so that's who we are. We're now going to move on to our next section, the overview. All right, so as I was just telling Julie in the prep for this, I have owned many, many, many copies of Twin Peaks over the last 30 odd years of home video collecting. What we're talking about today is the international pilot episode and normal pilot episode. They're functionally the same. Simply the last 20 minutes was added to the pilot in case it flopped. So ABC wanted to have a mechanism by which they could still make money on this David Lynch movie because David Lynch was somewhat of a hot property. If the TV show was not picked up to series, it turns out it was picked up to series. It was wildly successful. It was in fact proclaimed many times as one of the best TV pilots ever pitched. But we're watching the Twin Peaks A to Z Blu-ray, essentially, and the complete mystery. And this is a really good set. It has 22 discs, and it even has two 4K discs. So there's a 4K version of this pilot, in addition to the 1080p version and the 720p version that I've had kicking around for years, that I recorded off last year's purchase, which was the Twin Peaks Gold Box Definitive Edition, which itself was not definitive at the time that I purchased it, but it was able to pick it up really cheap online and go for there. Previous to that, I had individual season series of seasons 1 and 2, and I had two different regions. I had the European region 2 version of season 1, which included the pilot, and the region 1 version here in the United States, which did not include the pilot, for the specific reason that it was marketed as a standalone film, and so they didn't have the rights to put it in. And that wasn't even the first time that I'd seen the pilot because I did not watch Twin Peaks in 1990. I was busy doing other things. I wasn't watching television. In fact, I didn't even own a television in 1990. I spent most of my time playing games, role playing games, board games, and whatnot, or hanging out with my friends. But the woman I was living with at the time loved watching television and loved watching Twin Peaks, and she wouldn't fucking shut up about it. So I heard about Twin Peaks secondhand all throughout 1990, and then when our relationship broke up, because it did, I was done with Twin Peaks because I was kind of done with her. And many years later, I was at a friend's house, and they wanted something to do this afternoon, and they said, "Let's watch Twin Peaks." I was like, "Oh, I don't really want to watch Twin Peaks." And I told the story that I just told you, and my friend says, "Well, that's stupid. You got to watch the pilot." It's like, okay, we're here. It's Saturday afternoon. Let's watch the pilot. So six of us, piled onto a daybed in her spare room, and we watched the pilot on a pretty small screen. It may have been 22 inches CRT. I was mesmerized. It was so amazing to see this Kyle MacLachlan performance that I had never seen. I had seen the quirky I'm Dale Cooper, crazy shit is going on, but what's in the pilot is much different than what's going on there. And what I came to realize, and we'll talk about this later, is because the pilot was shot here in the Pacific Northwest. It used actual locations, it used actual people and actual places. And the series was not. They recreated almost everything shot for shot in the studio in Burbank, but it didn't have the environmental cues of the wind rustling through the trees, or what Dale describes himself going through there. It's like the wind through these trees is amazing. I gotta find out more about these trees. Those trees are a part of this. The city of Snoqualmie is a part of it. The city of Roslin's a part of it. These are actual places and things that contribute to the joy of Twin Peaks, especially the pilot that we're going to watch. And so, do you have some more to talk about the Twin Peaks pilot? Were you up here by then, or were you still in
Yes.
California?
Nope. I lived here, and in fact, I was already a big David Lynch fan and had read about Twin Peaks and was really looking forward to seeing it. And we happened to be at my parents' place. Looking at the date, it's possible we were there for Easter. Um, but we were at my parents' house, and so I made my parents watch the pilot of Twin Peaks.
But that would have been
I,
April
I,
of 1990, yeah.
yeah. I don't think it was their kind of thing, but they were good sports about it. But so my husband Paul and I, we were not married yet, but so I guess my future husband Paul and
The
I,
guy you were living with
um,
at the time who wouldn't shut up about Twin Peaks.
uh, yeah. Well, we watched the pilot together, and he was not the David Lynch fan that I was. He didn't like Blue Velvet. I think he was okay with Dune. But he was really won over by Twin Peaks. I think he the way he described it was being so excited to see Douglas Firs on TV.
Yeah.
Um, and so after the pilot, which I just loved, we told all our friends about it, and um, we had a group of friends in Bellingham who gathered together and watched it every week. Um, some of the people who were there, they subscribed, they got into the fandom. They had, the magazines and all of that kind of stuff. So it was very, it was very big in my social circle at the time.
Cool. So, try not to say so. Well, maybe I'll edit that out. I don't know. But this pilot was something that David Lynch and Mark Frost were specifically approached to pitch. The ABC reached out and says, "We really like your stuff, and we want you to do TV." And Dave Frost said, I don't really think Dave's going to go for that. He's we're doing, or Mark Frost, that rather. We're doing features, we're doing all this kind of stuff, but I'll see if he wants to do it. So they went and talked to him about it. It says, maybe. We'll see what we can do. Maybe they were in between stuff. They pitched it. They had a 10-minute meeting with the head of ABC's drama, and then they went away. And then the Writers Guild went on strike, and nobody was picking up any pilots ever again. Clearly, it was a pretty bad strike all the way through. But they wanted, when the strike was over, they came back to them and said, "Yeah, we really loved what you pitched us, and we want you to do this. Give us a script." And so, as David Lynch's often like to do, they had to go away for the weekend and write a script. And they did it for the simple expedient that Mark Frost typed while David Lynch talked. And the idea that they had was that there was a murder in a small town, and then there would be furs. There would be Douglas firs. Now, for those who don't remember, David Lynch grew up in Missoula, Montana. I spent my secondary school years in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is replete with Douglas firs. In fact, one of the things that resonated really strongly for me with the pilot, we'll cover this later on, is that what I saw on screen was what I ended up doing in high school. Those were the people I went to high school with, were those kinds of people doing those kinds of things in small town Pacific Northwest. Pilot was originally called, in the series, was originally called Northwest Passage. But while they were shooting, looking at locations, as they had finished the script and were looking around, they saw a couple of beautiful panoramas, and one of which was the Snoqualmie mountain range. And they said, "Oh, Twin Peaks. Oh, that's it. That's it. We're calling it Twin Peaks." And it stuck. So they came back with their script, their locations, a lot of things that we need to do. David Lynch has described Dale Cooper and his evolution as the person who says all the things that I want to say. And it makes a big difference all the way in. And so with that, I would think, Julie, it's time for you to read the wiki.
All right. I'll handle up my my mouse. Okay. So we are talking about the pilot episode of the surrealist mystery horror drama television series Twin Peaks, also known as Northwest Passage, premiered on ABC on Sunday, April 8th, 1990. The plot overview. The small northwest town of Twin Peaks, Washington, is shaken when the body of Laura Palmer is discovered, washed up on a riverbank, wrapped in plastic.
Wrapped in
FBI
plastic.
wrapped
Sorry, I couldn't
in
resist.
plastic.
Couldn't resist.
I know. I don't blame you. FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper, Kyle MacLachlan, is called in when Renette Pulaski, who attended the same high school as Palmer, is found wandering on a bridge before lapsing into a coma. Cooper believes there is a connection between Palmer's death and the death of another girl named Teresa Banks that happened a year earlier. Cooper discovers a small piece of paper with the letter R on it, shoved under Laura's fingernail. He tells Sheriff Harry S. Truman, Michael Untking, that under Banks' nail he found a T. Meanwhile, the Palmer family and friends struggle to come to terms with her death and wonder how it might have come about. Believing that this is the same killer who struck the previous year, Cooper starts an official investigation. Meanwhile, the rebellious Audrey Horne, Sherilyn Fenn, ruins a business deal
Ruins.
for her. The Norwegians are leaving. Sorry. Ruins a business deal for her father, Benjamin Horne, Richard Bamer. Sheriff Truman arrests Palmer's boyfriend, Bobby Briggs, Dana Ashbrook, who is secretly seeing a married waitress named Shelley. Palmer's best friend, Donna Hayward, Lara Flynn Boyle, and Palmer's secret boyfriend, James Hurley, James Marshall, discover a mutual attraction, and Laura's mother is terrified by a vision. The episode has two different endings, depending on which version of the episode one is watching. The American version ends with the above events, concluded by Sarah Palmer's nightmare of a hand digging into the ground and grabbing James' half of a necklace that belonged to Laura. The international version was filmed with 20 extra minutes of footage in case the series was not picked up by the networks, rather allowing them to release it as a television movie. It contains scenes from episode one where Sarah realizes that there was a man hiding in Laura's room when she checked in the previous day. It also contains the ending to episode two when Cooper dreams of meeting Laura and a mysterious man who speaks to him in a disjointed voice. It also reveals who Laura's killers were.
And that revelation is different for the international pilot than it is for the series, or it's the same depending on how you want to treat that content. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in the expanded coverage later on. But the killing of Laura Palmer was supposed to be the forever event while they were making this show. They never wanted to reveal it. They just wanted to have things investigate, investigate, investigate. And eventually, uh, since they had already filmed an ending that showed clearly who killed Laura Palmer, the network eventually got very tired of that mystery and made them solve it in the middle of season two. We'll get into that later. One of the things that home video really did for Twin Peaks is not only expose people to it who didn't get to see it in 1990, right? Because it was on and it went, and then they immediately went into season two, which went into about June of 1991, and then it hit rock bottom. It left the show, and it was never ever syndicated. It was only two seasons, and one of them which was short. It was never syndicated, but it went to home video after 1992's movie prequel of Fire Walk with Me. Interest was high for that movie, and it went to home video. And to introduce the VHS and Laserdisc versions of this, they filmed something called the Log Lady intros. The Log Lady is Catherine Coulson, the very first of our returning cast members for this, if we don't count Jack Nance, who is the guy who utters the phrase "wrapped in plastic." And Jack Nance, whom we've famously seen in almost all of our David Lynch productions to date, utters the actual first words spoken in the pilot. And it's "the gray fog rolls in, rolls in, rolls in." And he's just going fishing after we've seen a couple people staring into mirrors and gazing longingly at Douglas First and Twin Pines. But the reason why I bring up the Log Lady is the DVD set, the Blu-ray set rather, that I picked up, has all of those Log Lady intros on it. And I was able to extract them all and put them in such a fashion that we can watch them. So I'm really excited to share the Log Lady Episode 0 introduction. Right? Here she comes, the Log Lady.
Welcome to Twin Peaks. My name is Margaret Lanterman. I live in Twin Peaks. I am known as the Log Lady. There is a story behind that. There are many stories in Twin Peaks. Some of them are sad, some funny. Some are stories of madness, of violence. Some are ordinary, yet they all have about them a sense of mystery. The mystery of life, sometimes the mystery of death. The mystery of the woods surrounding Twin Peaks. To introduce this story, let me just say it encompasses the all. It is beyond the fire, though few would know that meaning. It is a story of many, but it begins with one. And I knew her. The one leading to the many is Laura Palmer. Laura is the one.
Okay, we're back. Wait, are we back? Say something.
Laura is the one.
Laura is the one. Yes. Well, such an ominous, ominous greeting from the Log Lady. What do you think about the Log Lady there?
Um, I always liked the Log Lady. I mean, when you're watching the pilot, um, she's introduced at a meeting of a bunch of townspeople where Dale Cooper is introduced to those same townspeople. He's talking to the sheriff. He's like, "Who's that person? Who's that person? Who's that person?" Um, and when he points to the Log Lady, it's like, "Well, who's that lady with the log?" "Oh, that's the Log Lady." And I swear there's never been anything funnier.
I laugh every time. I simply do.
I
It, especially with knowing what I do, even within the pilot, right? I've studied Twin Peaks back to from A to Z multiple times, and we're going to try really hard to keep our impressions today to the pilot and the story that was introduced here. But even in that, one of the things that happens at that meeting, and Dale Cooper says, "Who's that looker?" And he points out Joan Chen, his character of Josie Packard. And with a completely straight face, Michael Lon Keen, playing Sheriff Harry Truman, says, "That's the most beautiful woman in this state, or one of the most beautiful women in this state." And what he's not saying is, "And I'm sleeping with her." But it's completely deadpan, right? He reveals nothing to Dale Cooper, who has already proved himself to be super observant. And he's looking straight at the woman he's in love with and says, "That's one of the most beautiful women in the state." And then explains her backstory in 20 seconds. And everybody that we talk to and are introduced to in this pilot gets introduced by the sheriff in this fashion, more or less. Who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And that meeting was really good. It's one of my big takeaways from this pilot is what a great job David Lynch does of setting all that up in this initial screenplay and showing us who's there, who's doing stuff. Now I think the pilot really works as a pilot. There were Bob Iger, who was the CEO of Disney at the time, CEO of ABC at the time, and eventually became CEO of Disney, was really worried that the pilot would not hit with people because it was so different than a lot of stuff that they were putting on ABC at the time. And he'd shown it to network executives, and network executives just going, you got that extra footage, right? You got that extra footage? And so, yeah, we got the extra footage. We got the extra footage. And then he showed it to a bunch of 18 to 26-year-olds. And they said, "Oh my God, give me that." They couldn't stop talking about how awesome Twin Peaks was. And that's the boom, ship it moment, right? It's like, we're shipping that. We're taking that to series. And that's how many scripts can you write and when can you write them? So those Log Lady introductions were written and directed by David Lynch. He had some small success of, doing small short films, and he was able to do it with, a lot of money and no setup. And that was for when it got its final syndication after Fire Walk With Me, as I mentioned earlier. It syndicated on the Bravo network, which is a paid TV channel that almost nobody had access to. It was eventually bought by Sony, and then once upon, I think it became the Criterion channel at one point. But it lived on home video. That's where Twin Peaks was. And when DVDs came out, boy howdy, did a lot of us go pony up for that. I paid $100 for that first set of Twin Peaks discs, and I got my money's worth. My friends, I had some friends who lived in Canada. In fact, I may even have them come down and talk about their Twin Peaks fandom when we get to the time for that. But they had a key to my house, and they would share the key amongst themselves. When one of them was going down to Seattle, they would go get the key from whoever had it last, get the key. And they would come down and they would say, "Hey, I'm coming down." So, "Great, we got the key." I said, "Yeah, we got the key." And they would come in. And so my friend Warren came home one night and he was just sitting there staring at my television watching Twin Peaks. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I have that." Because he had gone and looked through my stuff, found the Twin Peaks DVDs and put them in there. But that's where it lived. And I thought it was never better than on the small screen. I think it suffers from large screens now, even though because it was filmed 4:3, right? And even at the high definition that I've got it at in 1080p, it's still 4:3. They're not showing it any other way. This is the exact way that this should be seen within the confines of a camera window. It's camera obscura. All the stuff here and happening in your house, none of that matters. Turn the lights off, watch Twin Peaks. And so I've seen it on my big screens. I've seen it on the very monitor that Julie's looking at me out of right now in the last few days. And I'm going to go watch the 4K version on my projection screen tomorrow or next week, just to round it out to say, oh, how cool is this going to be in 4K? I don't think it's going to be any better than 1080p, but it could be pretty awesome because I know that they made a really concerted effort to ramp up the sound. And that brings us to one of our recurring characters, and Angelo Badalamenti, who we'll talk about in our expanded coverage. So You mentioned watching the pilot live with your parents and Paul. What are your impressions of it now in 2025? It's 35 years old.
Um, wow. It's almost not of its time. And what I mean is that when I watched it, there were signs that it wasn't a modern that it wasn't a modern thing, particularly people smoking indoors.
Oh
That's
yeah.
one of your biggest signs that something is either filmed or set not in the present day, is if people are smoking indoors. Um, but other than that, David Lynch's aesthetic sensibilities age incredibly well. Partly because he tended to peg his artistic sensibilities to not they weren't super contemporary. They are contemporary, and you can tell, like, if you look at the you know, hairstyles and makeup choices and things like that. But the fact that he had that very distinct Lynchian thing of kind of pegging it, it's the same aesthetic that he used for Blue Velvet, where it's kind of pegged as where the 80s meets the 50s, and everything very stylized, like and you could see it in the Log Lady introduction. One of the things I really noticed was that how incredibly warm all of the tones were, like almost everything except like the sky. So when you're indoors, everything is, kind of reddish and brown, a lot of brown tones. Um, so that all struck me. The other thing that really struck me is that a lot of the developments that are hinted at in the pilot, um, they really do pay off all those developments, but by the time they pay them off, a lot of times I remember, oh yeah, I kind of lost track of that, or I kind of lost track of that. It's like, oh, right, Ghostwood and things like that. Um, so that was another thing that struck me. Um, I was also struck by how iconic so many of the elements were, especially when you include the standalone pilot, because the standalone pilot, of course, has the dream.
Yeah.
And I would say that the what we eventually come to call the Red Lodge, that iconography,
The Red Room in the
is
White Lodge.
the what's that?
The Red Room in the White Lodge.
Okay, yes, the Red Room is
Yeah.
sorry.
There's so many
Yes, but
colors.
there's so many colors. But yes, the iconography of the Red Room, the iconography of Laura Palmer wrapped in plastic. There was a fan magazine that was called Wrapped in Plastic that somebody used to get in the household where we gathered to watch Twin Peaks. Um, the iconography of all of the cast members, they were on everything. They were on TV Guide, and they were on Rolling Stone, and they were on People, and they were on, I don't know, Vanity Fair. Um,
They were on the Today Show. I mean, that's when you make it
they're on
big.
the Today Show.
When ABC
Um,
decides to pimp its own shows on its own shows.
yeah, and also the iconic music. Um, just, I can't watch it without, like, if I watch it, I leave humming.
Yeah.
I've been going
Yeah.
all day long. Like, I've been doing that all day long. Um, and there's never been anything quite as, I mean, okay, I'm sure there have been things as iconic as that, but it's surely one of the most, like, just incredibly iconic TV shows. Um, and There's never been anything quite like it, although it really set the stage for many things that came afterwards. Like, I'm
Oh yeah,
pretty
we'll definitely
sure,
cover that in our expanded coverage because it changed
yeah,
television
it
forever.
it exactly. It changed television forever. Um, there was one thing that struck me when I was watching it that I don't remember thinking at the time, possibly because I hadn't watched The Shining yet. But there were many places where it actually did kind of put me in mind of The Shining, the movie.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought that was kind of interesting because it makes sense, but I didn't notice when it was new. Um, let's
Yeah, the
see.
pilot is far more grounded, I think, than the series pickup. It's not the supernatural psychic bit, right? Except for when you get into the dream sequence in the expanded pilot, but it's not that way, right? It's Dale Cooper showing up to town and telling people, "Hey, the FBI is here. By the way, there's a serial killer. Lock up your daughters." And then when they fail to lock up their daughters, Dale Cooper and Harry Truman have to jump into action. So there wouldn't be an X-Files without Twin Peaks. Not only because it's a Mark Frost sort of deal, but it just wouldn't be there. Fox would never have taken a chance on that. But the fact that they showed Twin Peaks could do it meant that you could do an X-Files. It meant that you could do a lot of different types of television. You weren't locked into westerns or cop shows, or well, I mean, westerns were still a going concern in 1990. There was a Magnificent Seven show that came out that year, right? I mean, Unforgiven was huge in the box office. There was so many things. Briscoe County Jr., right, was the show that Fox bet all of its money on. They thought Briscoe County Jr. was going to be the show that would take them to the moon. It turns out they were wrong. It was X-Files, which was the follow on to Briscoe County Jr. that really hit it big on it with that same 18 to 26 demographic that really sparked for Twin Peaks. So yeah, it sounds like we're ready to go to expanded coverage. Do you have any more initial blush thoughts about the pilot? Now let's talk about that extra 20 minutes. I mean, how often have you seen the international version versus the US version?
I would say only a couple times.
Yeah.
I've seen the international version a couple of times. I've seen the US actual pilot many more times. So,
Yeah.
in fact, until watching it last night, I'd completely forgotten um, about the bit with Lucy and Andy getting ready for bed,
Yeah.
and the fact that for some reason their getting ready for bed ritual involves her playing with one of those
At a ball.
paddles and him learning the trumpet.
Yeah.
That part, I was just like, oh my gosh, this bit seems even weird even for David Lynch, honestly.
Yeah, that 80 seconds, right? They had to include that 80 seconds. And that's actually it's exclusive to that pilot. That's not in episode 2. They just mentioned that Hawk is able to do that. And so I think Hawk has more time in the international pilot than he does in the normal pilot. He's just in the background. I don't think he's named, to be perfectly honest. In the first 90 minutes of Twin Peaks, he's named in that next bit where Lucy says, "Oh, our sketch art deputy Hawk, he will be able to do that for you." So they call him out there and explain who he is because since he appears in those 20 minutes, Lynch needed a moment, needed a beat to introduce a character that you're about to see it, so he didn't have to explain who that character was later on. We got Killer Mike and Killer Bob in the expanded coverage. So Frank De Silva is the person who plays Bob, the ultimate murderer of Laura Palmer, depending on how you look at it. And he was a production assistant on the show. He was actually part of the crew, and he got caught in a reflection on screen during a daily, and they saw that and said, "Oh crap, we have to scrap this. Frank's in the shot." So, what do you mean Frank's in the shot? Show me. And so they showed David Lynch where he was caught in a reflection on a shot. He goes, "No, leave it in. I'll figure it out." And then they went to Frank Silva and said, "All right, we want to put you on screen. How do you feel about that?" He says, okay, do I have a line? Yeah, you have a line. So he got a SAG card for essentially the expanded pilot, but not for the regular pilot. And the stuff with Laura's mom, Grace Zabriskie, uh, it's the most jarring change, right? Because she just wakes up. I had a psychic vision of a hand and the thing, but what she's actually reacting to is Bob is upstairs at that moment, and she's remembering Bob being downstairs and remembering Bob being in the room and scaring her, and her horrible nightmares and premonitions about her daughter and how she knew her daughter was dead when she wasn't showing up at home. She just knew, and she's calling Leland. She's calling everybody, saying, tell me you've seen Laura. Tell me you've seen Laura. Tell me you've seen Laura." And until she spends most of the pilot anesthetized because the psychic vision has traumatized her so badly. But one of the hugest, biggest moments of this pilot is when the sheriff goes and finds Leland Palmer. He's at the Great Northern Lodge as part of the whole Norwegian deal. He's their lawyer. And the sheriff has to take him aside and say, "Hey, I need to talk to you." It's like, "I'm on the phone with my wife. I really need to talk to you, Leon. What is it? What's going on?" It's about your daughter." And he goes, "What?" And that's the exact moment that Mom Palmer knows that she's dead. But it takes Leland saying it out loud on the phone for all that's going on. And there's this wonderful shot of just the phone on the ground. You know that she has dropped the phone and she is losing it off screen. You don't have to even hear her screaming or anything more after the first scream. Just the shot of that phone was unlike anything that they'd shown on television. And Homicide: Life on the Street was out at this time. There were other kinds of cop shows, like Hill Street Blues, that were covering this sort of content. Not the actual content that we're talking about, and we'll talk to later. But it was jarring. And I caught those details again, especially the number of times I had to watch those extra 20 minutes to make sure that I was getting it all together. Because in the Gold Box edition, the pilot isn't a standalone thing. It's something that's stitched together by the software. And so it runs the first pilot, and then it runs that second bit. But there's not a track on the disc that was, "This is the international pilot." If you wanted to watch it all the way through, you had to put the disc in, or you had to make your own all the way in. So I saw that footage a bunch of times, just trying to get the timing down, trying to look at how it all worked. And it really is a good 2-hour movie. I think it's a good 90-minute movie. The 90-minute movie doesn't solve the mystery of Laura Palmer, and I think the 2-hour movie doesn't solve it either, but it at least tells you who did it. And you've got two characters who have no real relation to anything else going on in the pilot. They're just there to be the bad guys in Killer Mike and Killer Bob. Killer Mike is the one-armed man, whom we'll talk about later. But yeah, they don't have any, they're not part of the movie until they're required to be part of the movie so that they can sell it overseas if necessary. Turns out it wasn't necessary, but they already shot the footage, they already cut the film, and that's all we need to do. All right.
Yeah, it did strike me as very abrupt. The whole, like, everything unfolds at a certain pace. And it feels very natural for it to end with Grace Zabriskie, her that moment. Tacking on the next 20 minutes, it feels very much like, okay, let's get this wrapped up, and we're going to introduce a bunch of characters you've never seen before, and oh, look, that guy did it. Oh, that guy. Oh, okay, let's shoot him. It yes, it does tell you who killed Laura Palmer, but it's not a satisfying ending to the
Not
story.
satisfying ending at all.
So,
And we'll talk about just how unsatisfying it is in our next section of expanded coverage. So, Julie, talk about our Lynchian tropes. What's on display here in the pilot? that we need to, that the casual viewer who's going to go watch it after they see our show will want to look out for?
Well, I'd say the biggest Lynchian trope that really kind of animates the whole series is the Lynchian trope of sort of innocence versus corruption. Because obviously, both thematically and story-wise, the whole thing is driven by the the fact that Laura is the one, um, that Laura Palmer was kind of this nexus of the fight between innocence and corruption. And the fact of things being hidden, that there's this hidden world, this unseen world, that you draw back the curtain and there's all these, these corruptions that you didn't know were there. I would say the kind of the sense that things are out of time, that they aren't fully anchored within their temporal reality, that it's partly an aesthetic, but I would say it's very much a David Lynch, it's a thematic Lynchianism. Like he does not tend to anchor his work in the contemporary. Um, he just never has done that. Um, I would say another Lynchian trope is the things that are long, slow, maybe a little boring, punctuated by moments of really intense violence or emotional violence, like intense emotion, things that are very bloody, screaming. Um, I would also say another interesting Lynchian trope on display is men having emotions. Um, the men in this pilot are allowed to cry and scream and have reactions in a way that it's not always present in other fiction. A lot of times male characters are sort of forced into this more I don't know, stoic role, and they're certainly not allowed to cry without being made an object of fun. And so, like, for example, Andy,
Yeah. Deputy Andy, Harry
and
Goaz.
Deputy Andy, on two, maybe even three occasions, is so overcome by the violence, by death. He loses it. He cries. He can't do his job, and he's not made a figure of fun for that. It's not treated funny. It's not treated as funny, and it's also not treated as making him um, a bad person or worthy of ridicule. Like, I think there's one point where um, the sheriff is like, "Come on, Andy, are we going to do this every time?" But there's a camaraderie to it,
He's
and
not
I think
castigating him, right? He actually, Sheriff Truman really cares about Andy and Andy's feelings, and he
yes,
wouldn't be there if he wasn't good at his job. What I love is the second time, like Andy loses it when Laura's body is discovered because he knows Laura, right? He knows Laura. He knows everyone in town. He's the deputy sheriff. But later on, the moment that there's the second big moment of his emotions. He's on the phone with
Lucy,
she's on the phone with Lucy,
right?
who he's seeing, right? And we don't know that they've got that strong of a relationship until they show us in the international pilot that they're actually living together, or at least spending nights over all the time. He's on the phone with her, and he could barely contain himself. It's like, I found it. I found where it happened. Tell the sheriff. Tell the sheriff I didn't cry. And he says, "Tell the sheriff I didn't cry," while he is sobbing so hard he could barely hold his radio up. Tell him I didn't cry. Tell him I didn't cry. And it's like, because he's so concerned that he won't be able to keep doing his job if the sheriff thinks he's a liability. And Harry doesn't. He knows who Andy is. He knows he's good at his job all the way around. Any more than, he thinks that Hawk is going to be going off and doing stuff. I love how traumatized Leland Palmer is by all of this. I mean, he is near catatonic at certain points of this episode, this pilot. But he's not allowed hysterics like Sarah is. I mean, Sarah is just gone. She has a schizoid break. She has a psychotic break because of what happened. Breaking the timeline, many, many, many years later, we know why she has that break. But right here in this pilot, we just know that her daughter has died, right? And Leland's daughter has died, and it's people's friends. When they show Donna Hayward's reaction at school, Donna Hayward is just, oh my God, her best friend, who she had seen the night before, right, is dead. It's like, what? Huh? What? What did I do? What did I do wrong? All of her friends go to talk to Donna. James is right there in the room when they find that out. James is in love with Laura, and he's trying really hard not to cry, not to give that reaction, to let people know that I actually care about Laura Palmer. So I'm the rebel outlaw. You know, nobody can know that I've got these feelings. But as you mentioned, I was like, yeah, men have feelings. Men have feelings up and down the thing. Except for Leo Johnson. Fuck that guy. Leo Johnson, the only feeling that he engenders is rage. So Eric DeRay is actually one of the first listed cast members in the pilot, starring Eric DeRay, because he was a big name that they got through casting all the way in. And he plays Shelley's husband. Shelley is Machen Avic's character, the waitress at the diner, who is not mentioned by name in the actor isn't mentioned in the wiki. I thought that was kind of odd, even though she's right here on the cast list next to it all. But yeah, he's a horrible person, and he's a truck driver. Bobby, who is Laura's actual boyfriend, is actually seeing Shelley as well, and proclaims that he loves her. I mean, Julie talked about the cigarettes earlier, right? The major plot point that Leo finds two different kinds of cigarette butts in the ashtray at his house. One is Shelley's and one is Bobby's. And says, from now on, you only smoke one cigarette. And then he slaps her across the face. And it's like, holy shit. Way to make us not feel anything for Leo, right? You've shown him beating his wife right now. Like, okay, wow. We don't have to care about him. Good job. Now I can hate him for the rest of the show. And I do. All the way top to bottom, 2 seasons worth. He, spoilers a bit, he kind of gets what's coming to him, but at the same time, he kind of doesn't. One of the big men we're talking about here is one of our recurring cast members of Everett McGill, who plays Hank Jennings. And Hank Jennings, Hank, right? Did I get this right? I
think Hank is
no, Hank is right. Hank is the other ones. Fuck, my brain just ate a name. Hold on a second. I need to go to a different page to look at something.
Are you looking for Big Ed?
Yeah, is Big Ed. So I'll just say Big Ed. So Big Ed is seeing Norma Jennings. Norma Jennings is the one who basically manages the diner. I don't think she owns it, but she manages the diner. And they're having a relationship. And Norma's husband is in jail. And it's brought up as saying, well, when your sweetheart's husband is away for manslaughter, I kind of get nervous. And it's like, oh, yeah, well, I don't think he's coming home anytime soon, Norma says with a wink at the audience. But they're having that conversation in this Roadhouse bar where a fight breaks out between Bobby and James. And there's a bunch of relationship talk happening between all these different people. Donna Hayward and James are talking. Ed and Norma are talking. And then Bobby and Mike, who is Donna's boyfriend, all this stuff comes together. They come in, they start picking a fight. And then Big Ed gets up and says, that's enough of that, son. He goes, oh, yeah, what are you going to do about it? And he starts to separate them. And then the high school kid just goes off and clocks him. And there's this fight. The camera pulls back, and there's this huge melee going on, and people throwing punches and jumping all over each other and doing all this kind of stuff. And then one of James's biker buddies grabs Donna and takes her out of the room just to say, you can't be here. Come with me. And that's where we get to the end of the episode, is her going off to meet James. But all the while, there's this huge fight going on at the Roadhouse. And as it happens, Dale Cooper and Sheriff Truman are outside in a car staking the place out when the fight happens. So they're able to arrest Bobby and Mike and throw them in jail, where you see them screaming at the end of the episode because they have some feelings, even though they're shitty feelings. And they're screaming at James when James is arrested and put in jail with them.
Weirdly, it's more like they hoot at him.
They hoot at
It's
him.
not really a howl. It's like they bark at him almost. It's
Yeah.
like, woo, woo, woo. I mean, it's the weirdest thing.
But one of the neat things about that scene, which ties back to our tropes, is they're in jail, in the Twin Peaks jail, in the cells, and the lights are turned off. There is no light going on in that room until they bring James in. And the darkness is there. Hawk turns on the light. She pushes James into the room, so that's the light is coming into the room. And then you slowly pan over to see Mike and Bobby hanging on to the bars like this, where they have been in the dark the entire time since they were arrested, because they are the darkness. They are bad people. It's a good person who's put into jail with them, and they're yelling at him, and he's staring at them, trying not to show emotion, but he's clearly got emotion. And they know it's him who was seeing Laura, and they know that he's got some sort of relationship with Donna because of the video that was shot all the way around. And I have a big deal all the way in there. So our returning cast is really light. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say another couple of interesting David Lynch tropes. Speaking of light, the flickering light in the autopsy room. I think that I'm not sure if that was really a Lynchian trope until Twin Peaks, but the instant it appeared, it's a Lynchian trope forever.
Well, that's I mean, that was an Elephant Man and the Eraserhead thing. The
flickering. Yeah, the lights that are malfunctioning. Also, the fact that the stoplight in the town goes to red.
Yeah.
And then it never changes.
Never changes, yeah.
Never changes. And also the scene where they come in and they go to get Laura Palmer's safe deposit box and it's
just an animal head on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an animal head on the table. It's explained, it fell off the wall, but I feel like inexplicable things that everyone treats as normal is a really overarching
visual non
David Lynch
sequiturs
trope.
Right, just
visual non
in there and
sequiturs.
Goes, "What's up?"
Exactly.
And Dale just looks at it and she says, "It fell." You know, she just, and Harry goes, "All right, things fall all the time. World's an imperfect place."
Yeah, and David Lynch's filmmaking style is actually part of where that comes from, is that a lot of times if something like that happens, he'll just incorporate it.
Yeah.
You know, like if he catches a crew member reflected in a mirror, he doesn't do the shot again. He thinks about how to use that.
The flickering light, and they made it up the part of the plot. In fact, Mike mentions the light hurts my eyes. Don't turn the light on, because he's in the darkness, and the light is the purity all the way around. Trying to think where we are next. So, our biggest recurring character, of course, is Kyle MacLachlan. This is after Blue Velvet, he gone off to do a couple small projects. One of which was The Hidden, I think, which was an alien vampire movie where he plays an FBI agent, kind of. And so they dressed him up in clothes that you essentially see him wearing here in Twin Peaks, because he had that right look. And I think he was the first choice for Dale Cooper. He didn't want anybody else but Kyle MacLachlan. Everett McGill, who played Stilgar in Dune, is Big Ed here. Jack Nance, of course, has been in everything. This is his fifth collaboration with David Lynch, if you count the short film The Cowboy and the Frenchman, which we have not covered yet. We'll cover it at a later date, but it was 1987. It was part of a video series that was only aired in France, so it's really hard to get. You have to get it as part of a DVD set that I don't own yet. But Jack Nance is the one, right? Say Laura Palmer's the one, but really Jack Nance is the one. And after Twin Peaks, you'll see him in 2 or 3 more things but he sadly did not make it to the revival. He had passed before the revival came to play. Catherine Coulson is a returning cast member, the Log Lady. He was the amputee, but also was a producer on Racerhead. And our most important collaborator, Angelo Badalamenti. Him and his Moog synthesizer and the way he did stuff. He came to our screens in Blue Velvet, along with Julie Cruz, the vocalist. And Julie Cruz is the nightclub singer that you see at the Roadhouse and who sings the Falling theme, which is the Twin Peaks theme. All that stuff. And a lot of the incidental music that you'll see and hear throughout Twin Peaks is Julie Cruz. Sadly, she and David Lynch had a bit of a falling out about royalties and the like and credits. So she doesn't come back into the fold for a while, but she's such an integral and essential part of the Twin Peaks experience that we have to mention her here. And as for the pilot, that's our recurring cast. You'll see, of course, many of these players as the show is picked up for seasons 1 and season 2, and quite a few of them in the revival. And so we'll mention them as they come up. But we need to talk about several other elephants in the room, is the import and impact that Twin Peaks has had all the way across fiction. So Twin Peaks is the show where it's okay to talk about rape. And that wasn't okay to talk about at all on television. You could not talk about that. You could talk about how someone had hurt somebody. You could even show someone hitting their wife, which, it's still shocking to see, especially now in 2025. But at 1990, this guy hit all the time. The joke was, what do you tell a woman with 2 black eyes? It's not something she hasn't heard twice already, right? The kind of backwoods hick morons that I grew up with are the ones who are right here in the Twin Peaks pilot beating on their wives or going to jail for manslaughter because they were beating on somebody in a bar. These are the people that I knew growing up, and they're on display here all about Twin Peaks. It's the last vestiges of the grand 1950s that people want to make great again is on display here in Twin Peaks, but it's portrayed in Twin Peaks as barbaric. It's portrayed as something that should not happen. It's the darkness that Julie was talking about. And we want to move towards the light. We don't want these people anymore. We don't want Leland Palmer. We don't want Benjamin Horne. We don't want people who are cheating on their wives. We don't want people who are cheating on their girlfriends. We want people who are earnest and honest about their feelings. And that's what David Lynch is trying to show us here in this. It's like, even though there's all of this horrible ugliness, this murder, these things are happening all the way around, there's still good and light in the world. That's kind of a final thought. I'll get to the final thoughts later, but that's on display is the misogyny, I don't want to categorize rape under the umbrella of misogyny because it's a wholly separate article that can happen to anybody. The rape, the violence, all of these things. Dale Cooper comes to town, he shines a light on them when most of the people in town don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because they know what's going on up in the woods. They know what's going on at the Great Northern or up on the peaks. I mean, Leo's dealing cocaine. Bobby steals the cocaine and sells the cocaine. Laura finds the cocaine, puts it in her safe deposit box, right? This is a small town in the middle of nowhere. There is no reason for cocaine to be in that town. Harry Truman says, "Oh no, we don't have that here, Dale." And Dale reminds him, "Told you, when the FBI runs an investigation, I'm in charge. We need to talk about the cocaine." I go, "Okay, I guess." But there's all of this stuff going on out of the Roadhouse where they're clearly serving underage drinkers, right? And that was a big thing in 1990. I can get to any bar I wanted in 1990. I was, not 21. I was 19, but I could do it, especially in Idaho. Shit, you could get beer whenever you wanted in Idaho. You could go to the store and buy beer. As long as you didn't drink it in the parking lot. Nobody cared because they knew you were buying it for somebody else. And so it really, he screenshotted, and screenshots the modern term, he captured the essence of growing up in the Northwest and being desperate to get out in this pilot in a way that is not shown in the series pickup, but it changed television. This pilot is called it's number 25 on the list of best TV episodes of all time by TV Guide. It's almost in the AFI Ain't Film suit by itself. It's not there because Fire Walk with Me is, and this just happened to be on television. But it's a big deal. X-Files happens because of this. Law and Order happens because of this. Various FBI shows or crime dramas happen with soap opera elements because of the ground broken here by David Lynch and Mark Frost in doing the Twin Peaks pilot. And it's no surprise that Bob Iger wanted it, right? He liked the pitch. He wanted the pitch. It's no surprise that network executives said, I don't get it, because they weren't getting it yet. But once the ratings hit, and it was the highest rating program every fucking week until it was canceled. Even it had dwindled the numbers at the end, but it was still a higher rated program than a lot of programs that are on right now. It was a huge destination television that people who weren't me were watching all the time. And it was a big deal. And I think that without Twin Peaks, David Lynch doesn't make Wild at Heart. He doesn't make Lost Highway. He certainly doesn't make Mulholland Drive. You know, and those are later on in his filmography, but he had the experience of doing Twin Peaks, right? And 1990 was a huge year. There are 3 things that came out for David Lynch that he'd all worked on in 1989. And then the TV show we'll cover next was a lighthearted family comedy that ABC had picked up. And they hated it. They hated the lighthearted family comedy that Dave Lynch had done because it wasn't Twin Peaks. People wanted to make Twin Peaks now and forever, and Dave Lynch wanted to make other things. So it absolutely affects how he made movies going forward, especially when we get down to Fire Walk with Me, which I think is a movie he didn't want to have to make. He wanted to do Twin Peaks Season 3. But being able to go back and show the Laura Palmer story as he did, especially when you get the missing bits. So there are 2 whole movies of Fire Walk with Me. What about the days leading up to the death of Laura Palmer that we'll get to see and cover in a much later episode. But this is a transformative bit for David. I think it's. I'm sad that I didn't get to watch it live. I'm grateful that I was able to watch it in the privacy of my own home with the lights off, and that I've been buying it over and over and over again for the years to get the best possible version that I can watch over and over again. Like, my friends would drive from another country to watch Twin Peaks at my house. You know, if you want to talk about an impact, that's a huge impact. They could have stopped off in Bellingham, watched it with Julie and Paul, but no, they came all the way to Seattle. Your thoughts?
I guess final thoughts.
Oh, no, we're still on the mythology and the impact.
Oh, mythology and impact. Yeah, okay, sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I kind of gave final thoughts as part of my expanded coverage, but I have more final thoughts to talk about later.
More final thoughts. Okay, so influence. I would say that that Twin Peaks seemed to. I mean, I feel like you really can talk about TV before Twin Peaks and TV after Twin Peaks, because I feel like certain things became taken for granted after Twin Peaks that had basically never been done before. And I would say one of them is there were nighttime soap operas, but Twin Peaks wasn't really a nighttime soap opera. It was a detective show with soap opera elements, and I feel like that was something that was not a like it. You know, like there was Dallas, and that was Dallas, and then there was Columbo, and that was Columbo. There was not previously anything where you would have a show where the main thing driving the plot was like an adventure show or a detective show or something, but then you got all that drama and all of that kind of stuff on the side, I guess, along the way. And I feel like that's de facto. That's what we expect for adventure and detective shows now, is we expect some kind of emotional through line. We expect drama and melodrama with the different characters. Um, and I would say another thing that Twin Peaks really established was the a TV show that looks like a movie, just cinematic filming, cinematic music, cinematic pacing.
Yeah, it was
Um,
tight. I mean, the pilots that were, if you look at the other big pilot of that year was Star Trek: The Next Generation's Encounter at Farpoint, right? Which is an absolutely shitty Star Trek episode, and it's slow and plodding, and it you see Tim as you over and over again as you go in all the way through it. But it was they knew they were going to pick up the series, so they used the pilot as two free episodes. This is not two free episodes of Twin Peaks. This is a 100% story that you tell from start to finish. They don't air this in two parts. They show it all the way around when it gets aired because you need to see that 94 minutes by itself. They don't split it into two episodes, and it's a big deal. The season one actually has seven episodes that are called episode one, episode two, episode three, episode four, episode five, episode seven. They have titles, but they're just called episode one. But there are 8 episodes in season one when you count the pilot, which is by itself a crazy bit that leads in. You don't get True Detective, I'll tell you that much for free. You don't get any kind of supernatural, there's weird shit going on story like that. I mean, books that I'm reading right now in the 21st century, they feel like Twin Peaks sometimes. You know, they've got mysterious urban fantasy going on with the elements of the supernatural, right? This is essentially urban fantasy at its finest, right? Back when cyberpunk was dominating the pulps, this is urban fantasy. It's just the fantasy is so small in the pilot, you don't get it. But by the time you go to A Man from Another Place, when we see on display here in that extra 20 minutes, you get to see the little guy. You get to see him talking backwards. You get to see the 25 years later dream that Dale has, which is brought up in the series pickup. Right? Those are not normal things. These psychic experiences that are going on. Apparently, this shit happens to Dale Cooper all the time. And it happens to people in his branch of the FBI all the time, as we'll see in the series pickup when we're talking to Special Agent Gordon Cole, our pal Dave. You know, this happens all the time to them, which is why they make a point of sending these special agents out. I think this is the last time, however, that you ever see a single FBI agent because they work in teams, they work in partners. And we learn much later on that Dale's partner is himself a serial killer, but that's not brought up here. It's not part of the pilot. It's simply he's the hired gun coming into town. It's almost Western-esque in his way, right? He's the lawman coming into town where there's other lawmen stomping all over it with his FBI boots. But he's right. He's the guy who's going to solve Laura Palmer's murder in a good way, not in the way that it was solved in the pilot, where someone just comes up and says, "Oh, I killed Laura Palmer," and then he gets shot in the chest, and then the person who shot him has a heart attack and dies. And if you're confused by that, so is everybody else in the world. It's like, what the fuck just happened? And that's the end of the pilot. So I think the American pilot is superior. I think those extra 20 minutes makes it a full-on movie, which is what they wanted, but it doesn't serve the pilot as well. And so pilots are made now in 40-minute blocks and not 2-hour blocks because they want that extra episode. So they'll try to cram all the character building stuff in as they can in those 46 minutes or 50 minutes maybe, and then they move forward. And if they're never going to show another thing, they try to tell a complete story, which is really what Twin Peaks, with Northwest Passage, if we want to call it that, gives to us, is this is how you should be making television. All right, it's final thoughts time. Julie, do you want to go first or should I go?
Sure, I'll go first. Um, my final thought about the pilot, something that struck me on rewatching, was how much I love that David Lynch worlds are full of weirdos. And they're full of every kind of weirdo. They're full of evil weirdos, and they're full of kind weirdos, and they're full of grotesque weirdos, and they're full of gorgeous weirdos. And I feel like a lot of fiction that sort of goes in that gothic direction that David Lynch goes in, um, has a tendency, an unfortunate tendency, I would say, to often show, um, you know, the corruption comes in from the weirdness. So like there's a connection between the gothic corruption and the weirdos. Whereas in David Lynch, everybody's a weirdo. The corrupted people are weirdos, the innocent people are weirdos. And I really like that. And Dale Cooper could have been a normal guy, but he's not. He's one of the weirdos.
He's one of the
You
weirdos.
know, he's incredibly handsome, and
So
he's
dreamy.
actually a very
So
dominant.
dreamy.
He's a very dominant character in that he basically takes charge of any scene he's in, but he is such a weirdo. And he's a weirdo in a very charming way, where he's so enthusiastic and he's so wholesome, really.
He's open to
You
new
know,
experiences of all kinds.
yeah. So anyway, that is why one of the reasons I like spending time in David Lynch worlds and Twin Peaks in particular.
But that's a really
Man, I
good
love
final
these
thought.
weirdos.
So my final thought is the obverse of that. But David Lynch's movies are and filmography, right? Because now we're including television, is full of the weirdos and the grotesque, all that kind of stuff. But it's also full of dark places where there are dark people doing horrible, unspeakable things. And it's okay to not like the darkness, to not like the dark things that Dave Lynch is showing you. You don't have to go to dark places if you don't want to. But you should acknowledge that they're there. Don't be like Sheriff Truman, who says, "Oh, there's no cocaine here. We don't have that problem here." He demonstrated to you that you absolutely do have that problem here. I mean, your homecoming queen just got murdered, wrapped in plastic, and dumped on a beach, right? That's not normal. It's not normal at all. It's certainly not normal to go under her fingernails and pull a letter out that eventually spells the name of her killer. It's not normal to have two girls kidnapped, beaten, and raped in a train car, and one of them escape and walk down the train tracks without knowing even her own name. That's what happens to poor Ronette Pulaski. Right? That's not normal. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. It happens all the time, especially in horrible small towns. There is one Native American in this show. There should be a ton of them in this show. A lot of them. Native American women get abducted 5 times more often than white women. And no one ever fucking talks about it. It's a huge, huge, grotesque deal what happens in this part of the country, the Pacific Northwest, but also in other parts of the country where natives don't have the power to represent themselves and to give themselves. So when you see Hawk as an upstanding member of the community, right? Michael Horse as the actor, and his name is Tommy Hawk Hill in the show. And when you see Hawk being an amazing artist and a gifted strategist, and all the cool, positive things that Hawk does, none of which show up in this pilot. But that's important to see that standout fighting against the darkness. When you see the sheriff fighting against the darkness, even though he doesn't want to acknowledge it, he still wants to fight it. When you see Andy so overcome by all the things that he sees that he breaks down crying and says, "Don't tell them I was crying. Don't tell them I was crying." But he still gets up and he does his job. He's processed the scene, crying all the way. making sure, because that was what he had to do to fight out the evil, nasty things that he saw every day in his life. You don't have to go to dark places, but you have to acknowledge them. Dale Cooper comes to town and he knows what darkness is. He's chasing serial killer. He knows how evil the world is, but he is still a beacon of light, the beacon of hope for the townspeople, for Harry, for Andy, for everybody who comes across Dale Cooper and sees him the way he is, except for, people who shoot him, hypothetically speaking. Dale Cooper's important, and that kind of protagonist is important. He's a prototypical Lynchian protagonist. He's very much like the character that he portrayed in Blue Velvet. I call that a proto Dale Cooper, right? Or the kid from The Grandmother's a proto Dale Cooper. That's David Lynch acting out how he thinks the world should be through his characters. And he says that David Lynch says that Dale Cooper is the person who says the things that I want to say and does the things that I want to do. And we're going to see a lot more of that, I hope, in our continuing coverage of Twin Peaks. So we should talk about our continuing coverage of Twin Peaks. Julie, what's next for us?
What's next?
Yeah.
We are going to talk about episodes 1 and 2, or depending on how you want to slice it, episodes 2 and 3.
Of season 1.
2 of season 1, the first 2 regular episodes.
All right.
The first Twin Peaks season.
We're going to do these going forward in 2-episode chunks. So I'll show 2 Log Lady intros, but we'll talk about the episodes together in our coverage, both our first impressions and our expanded coverage. But we'll definitely make a distinction of these things happen in this episode and these things happen in this episode. And since we'll be switching off, I think we'll switch off the plot synopses as we go forward. So Julie won't have to read 2 episodes at once. She'll read 1 episode, we'll talk about that. I'll read the next episode, we'll talk about that. And we'll go forward for there. All right. This has been a wonderful, wonderful episode of So Here's the Deal, one we've been looking forward to since we started this process. We're really looking forward to talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, and we'll talk more about that as the years progress. But right now, we're in the middle of 1990. We continue the spring and summer of 1990 in our coverage of Twin Peaks, and that'll be us going forward. I've been your host, Scott James Madden. You can find me online at a bunch of different places: Facebook, Blue Sky, here on YouTube, and a lot of different places. Julie, where can we find you online?
All of the usual. Julie McGilliard. I'm usually McJulie, but also gothhouse.org is kind of my home base.
Yes, and we don't own Twin Peaks. Except for all the DVDs that we bought, or the merchandise that we bought, or the coffee mugs that we have, or various Twin Peak themed stuff, but we don't monetize our streams or on Facebook, on YouTube. But what we do is we sell books. Julie and I are both science fiction authors, and you can buy my books up. You can get our books pretty much anywhere books are sold. So you can order us on Amazon. You can get us from the library. Please, please, please get us from the library, or from wherever books are sold. If you go to rsentertainment.com, it's a small press that I own and operate, you can get one of my books for free. Homefront, my science fiction novel. We're a progressive publisher who focus on independent authors and the stories that they tell. If David Lynch were alive today, I would ask him to sell me a book for rsentertainment.com. I believe that much in his message. But give us a check out. This has been So Here's the Deal. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.